It's official. 2024 will go down in history as the worst year of all time. None of the celebrity deaths were the ones I wanted. I've just been sitting at home, eating dog treats, waiting until December when I'm finally allowed to have opinions about video games. GOTY season is a fun time. With movies, we have a special TV show that can tell us the best film of the year. Games don't have anything like that. We have to do our own research by finding whichever YouTuber can make the best penis jokes. That's not me, but I deceived you anyway. Because a rare operating system bug has disabled your close window button, I'm here to tell you all about the single greatest video game released in 2024. I don't want to edit a whole hour of nonsense, so I'll cut right to the good part. The game of the year is... I don't know. Picking a game of the year in December has always felt like a fool's errand, unless you're the type to doggedly keep up with the big releases, which I'm not. At least 80% of the games I play aren't brand new, and I don't even own a PS5. The only new releases I played in 2023 were literally Mario and Zelda, and I still haven't finished either. Some might call me the least qualified person to make this video. But are all you any better? Think of all the excellent games going under the radar, the way Hollow Knight didn't blow up until it came out on Switch. We need a more methodical approach. Maybe, instead of scouring through every new game, we turn our eyes to how we got here. Because while I don't yet know the Game of the Year 2024, I do know every other Game of the Year in history. While I've mentioned a few of my GOTY choices in previous videos, I started compiling a proper list back in January, likely influenced by the book Video Game of the Year by Jordan Miner, which, full transparency, I have entirely lifted this video's premise from. It's a good read, but I couldn't help but notice they got all the games wrong. Not to fault the author, it was probably just a printing error, but this leaves us without a definitive GOTY source for years prior to the invention of the internet in 2014. Every Reddit post and backlogged list I've been able to find has been way off the mark. Today, that changes. We're listing off the greatest game of every year, reaching back to the very beginning of the video game medium, in 1985. Only then, as we complete our journey back to the present, will we find the key to determining the Game of the Year 2024. Let's begin. The Game of the Year 1985 is... City Connection. Nostalgia is a curious thing. As a child of children of the 80s, my oldest video game memories are with my mom's old NES. I can hazily recall the spark of adventure lit by that first screen of The Legend of Zelda. I remember Mom eventually granting me permission to play Duck Hunt after thinking it was too violent. I remember Mom not letting me play WrestleMania because it was too violent. 2 decades later, my childhood encounters with Zelda 1 are sunk beneath an ocean of mythologizing, sequelizing, and recontextualizing. I even call it Zelda 1. It's not like I yearn for the olden days whenever I eat a slice of pizza, no matter how many Chuck E. Cheese birthday parties I did or didn't attend. Zelda doesn't belong to that ghost of a kindergartner anymore. It belongs to Zelda. If you really want to take me back, I've only ever found one way to do it. Boot up City Connection and show me the title screen. What a striking image. The soft, sky blue text over a cloud white background, contrasting with the hard black outline on this very cool racer dude. The little accent of red hearts as the cursor and the dot of the I. That beautiful jingle. I love it. The game proper is mostly painting roads and assaulting the NYPD. Someday I might try getting good at it. Or maybe I shouldn't. Perhaps I ought to leave this one to the old times. Everyone else has already had a chance to write their early NES memories into the fabric of video game canon, and I'd like to join in. City Connection is a Hall of Famer. The Game of the Year 1986 is... Super Mario Bros. 2. Super Mario Bros. Is no bad game. It was the industry disruptor that shaped the identity of platformer games, the Famicom, the NES, and maybe just video games as a whole. I would never be one to devalue originality, but Video games are possibly the only form of entertainment where the sequel is usually better. Maybe that's a sign of the medium's immaturity and artistic underambition, but maybe it's just the nature of the craft. Super Mario Bros. 2 is what turned Super Mario Bros. From a game into an institution. It's what made this man synonymous with the concept of joy. Compared to the first game, every tile bursts with a cartoony liveliness. Super Mario Bros. 2 takes one step away from mechanical elegance and the square root of 2 steps toward expressive looseness. You can pick up and throw enemies, you can gamble with your coins, you can pick up magic potions which conjure doors leading to other worlds containing hidden treasure. The game is so unprotective of its intended experience as to provide 4 mechanically unique playable characters. While Super Mario Bros. Showed that a game about running and jumping could be great, Super Mario Bros. 2 showed that a game about running and jumping could be just about anything. The Game of the Year 1987 is Kick Challenger Airfoot. Do you ever feel like the indie game revolution could have happened much sooner than it did? Afloat in the Famicom sea of high fantasy action RPGs and scrolling spaceship shoot-em-ups is one Kick Challenger Airfoot, a singular tribute to everyone's favorite body part. Airfoot is what today's game designers wish the Famicom was. Its control scheme feels like the work of a time-traveling Bennett Foddy. Meanwhile, its bizarre level design, hinging on teleporters unpredictably zipping you around an endlessly scrolling loop, provides a quintessentially 8-bit flavor of mysteriousness. What elevates Kick Challenger Airfoot, foot warrior of the vegetable country, from mere forward-thinking curiosity to Game of the Year 1987 is the fact that the protagonist is a goddamn tomato. If Airfoot was an indie game published in 2024, mark my words, you'd play as a Sasquatch. But as it exists on Famicom Disk System, you play as a beautiful tomato man with 10 precious little toes, and I find that inspiring. The Game of the Year 1988 is Komori Ai no Doki Doki Rally. When I first heard of Komori Ai no Doki Doki Rally, I learned 2 facts. 1. This game is about rescuing Komori Ai from a kidnapping by driving a fast car. 2. Komori Ai, or Ai Komori for short, is a famous adult video star. From those facts, you may incorrectly assume, as I did, that this game was made with similar intentions to, say, Nakayama Miho no Tokimeki High School, of letting players get close with a simulacrum of an existing famous person. This is inaccurate. At the time of Doki Doki Rally's release, Ai Komori had not yet appeared in a single adult film. In fact, she had only been a gravure idol for a few months. From what I can tell, this is less a multimedia tie-in to an established brand, but instead a very weird way of marketing new talent by her studio Uchu Kikaku. This context, I feel, transforms Komori Ai no Doki Doki Rally into a critique of celebrity culture and our fascination with the lives of strangers. Do you, the game asks, care enough about this regular woman's fictionalized well-being and digitally compressed naked body to endure a profoundly bare-bones driving game? Why does this stage name and this winning smile possess importance to you? Marketing? Libido? Can you just not let a name remain anonymous? I'll just leave you with this. It's easier than ever to make a video game. If you happen to be in the process of starting an OnlyFans, give it some thought. The Game of the Year 1989 is Coors Light Bowling. Speaking of marketing, 1989 finally proved that brands can be our friends sometimes. Coors Light Bowling is a seminal work all too often left out of the history books. 17 years before Wii Sports, decades before every arcade served alcohol, Coors Light Bowling combined the refreshing taste of the bowling alley with the pure exhilaration of cracking open a cold one. I know, calling this Game of the Year feels like a stretch. Coors Light Bowling, after all, is only a reskin of 1988's Capcom Bowling. I like this version better. The Coors Light branding, while loud and unavoidable, wisely limits itself to the periphery. The title screen suggests the use of a Coors Light can as a bowling ball, one not literally true within the game itself. I suppose that would require a rather significant overhaul of the physics model, which would probably break the game. One could imagine Coors Light instead taking the place of the pins, a clever brand integration that would nonetheless portray the beverage as weak, undesirable, emasculated. No, Coors Light Bowling speaks the language of implication and subtext, as advertising often does. I find this game's top-down viewpoint and trackball controls that I'm imperfectly emulating with a mouse lend it a grounded, almost toy-like quality. This game is made to be the supplement to good conversation between friends, much like a cold beer. I played it alone in my room at 11 a.m. The Game of the Year 1990 is Plumpy. Plumpy has long been praised as a classic by millions of auto-generated web pages around the world. The game is an arcade-style platformer for the Amstrad CPC, published by the French computer magazine, Amstar and CPC. Plumpy will not challenge any stereotypes about old-school European computer games. It's got flashy graphical effects, some banger title screen music that's several minutes longer than necessary, and a good helping of retro jank. Every level, you're faced with a helping of fruit, a green creature chasing you down, and a purple creature you have to kill to move on. Kill green guy, round up all the fruit, then assassinate purple guy. This is complicated by a stiff jump and a measly 3 lives to work with. I've only ever made it as far as the Fs. I could never figure out the Fs. What Plumpy lacks in elegance, he makes up for in intrigue. I'm in love with this game's titular character. His detailed portrait only appears briefly when you boot up the game, but instantly I want to know more about his whole deal. Is this the French touch I keep hearing about? For all I know, every video game over there stars a buck-toothed rat creature with a wacky hairstyle. Maybe in France, today Plumpy has his own series of blockbuster movies. I wouldn't know. I hate airplanes. The Game of the Year 1991 is Not the Lord of the Rings. Adventure games just aren't for me. I've tried to get into Monkey Island and Full Throttle, and I ultimately don't think I've ever done an adventure game puzzle that felt satisfying to solve. I prefer genres that are more honest and consistent about their mechanics. Also, text parsers are scary. I don't like adventure games. Not the Lord of the Rings is an exception. I know what you're thinking. Oh boy, here comes another meddling casual who thinks Not the Lord of the Rings is the only good adventure game. I'm sorry, but it's true. Not the Lord of the Rings is great because its game mechanics get out of the way. Many adventure games pretend they don't have game mechanics. Not the Lord of the Rings is more honest. You will never need to enter a command longer than 2 words. Move between areas, take and use items. That is it. Every grabbable item is clearly marked in all caps when you enter the area. Sometimes the game is a bit picky about which exact use verbs it accepts, but that's to be expected in these older games. Look at this walkthrough. Pristine. Every adventure game solution should look like this. Not the Lord of the Rings does not let mechanical complexity get in the way of telling the funniest video game story seen in years. You will never look at the Lord of the Rings the same again. The uncle's name is Dildo. He has anal sex. A different character smokes marijuana. I'd give more examples, but I wouldn't want to spoil anything. Know that by the time you cast the ring into the crack of doom, you will know in your heart that this is not the Lord of the Rings. The Game of the Year 1992 is My Eyes. I won't pretend My Eyes is a revolutionary adventure game masterpiece on the level of Not the Lord of the Rings. The two aren't even comparable. My Eyes isn't trying to be a game of exploration and crafty riddles. In true PC-98 fashion, it's a game about exhausting every option from a menu until the story progresses. So why did I award Game of the Year to this instead of Bumpy's Arcade Fantasy? Do I have to explain? You don't need me to put into words how visually stunning this game is. That's right. I'm talking about the box art. Feast your eyes on this. The Game of the Year 1993 is Hitchcock ni Chosen. I've heard what all you pretentious fucks on Twitter say about Hitchcock ni Chosen. These AAA game companies have too much movie envy. What happened to focusing on good gameplay? I don't think you fully understand what this game represents. You're all stuck in 1992. With Hitchcock ni Chosen, Toyota has proven at last that video games are not just toys anymore. Hitchcock ni Chosen harnesses the revolutionary new technology of CD-ROM to bring the legendary filmmaker to life right in your living room. Hitchcock ni Chosen represents a future of possibilities beyond our wildest dreams, a future of full-motion video and photorealistic graphical fidelity, a future transcending the boundaries of man and machine, where using the power of Red Book audio, our technology might speak with us, just as a human would.
ようこそ皆さん。アルフレッド・ヒッチコックです。
Imagine if you can the union of truth and dreams, of science and poetry. Imagination births technology, and technology brings us closer to God. Someday, video games may even have their own Alfred Hitchcock, an artistic luminary who at last fulfills the medium's promise as the ultimate synthesis of human creativity. When that day comes, if I live to see it, I will remember Hitchcock ni Chosen and say, thank you. The game of the year, 1994, is King James Bible for use on Game Boy. What can I say about the Bible that hasn't already been said? King James Bible for use on Game Boy brings the iconic sacred text into the digital age. For centuries, the Word of God has captivated millions and cemented itself among the most significant cultural artifacts of all time. On Nintendo's famous handheld, Wisdom Tree Incorporated takes scripture to the next level. You can read the Bible, you can search the Bible, you can play hangman with words that are in the Bible. It's a miniature Lord and Savior all in your pocket. A video game primarily about reading stands out from the crowd in 1994, but just like Jesus Christ, this game has been vindicated by time. In fact, one might argue that the King James Bible is the first American visual novel. At time of writing, the Mr. FPGA's Game Boy core is incompatible with this game. What a price to pay! The game of the year, 1995, is Another Bible. Even as a Pokemon kid, even as a lifelong handheld gaming aficionado, I still underestimate the Game Boy's capability to replicate any genre more complicated than Sokoban. Another Bible is a tactics game. Making a tactics game for the Game Boy feels to me like writing your dissertation in refrigerator magnets, but here we are. As will delight casuals like myself, Another Bible cuts away the overgrowth of systems and customization found in the genre's standard bearers. You don't even get to customize your weapons and armor, only a single accessory slot. It's wickedly easy to jump in and enjoy. However, as with jazz, it's all about the notes they do play. True to its Megami Tensei lineage, Another Bible still allows you to recruit almost any enemy to your side. It dabbles in defamiliarized Christian symbolism, possibly explaining why the GameFucks.com walkthrough credits Jesus Christ. Despite its home on one of the smallest screens in video games, Another Bible consistently fills the upper right corner of said screen with a display showing the current phase of the moon, a variable relevant to like a couple of abilities. If you are a gamer looking for the Bible for you, look no further. The game of the year, 1996, is Imadoki no Vampire: Bloody Bride. Who doesn't love a classic dating simulation? The PlayStation X, or PS1 for short, is renowned worldwide for such landmark iconic DS games as Love Therapy and Renai Koza Real Age. Neither of those games are about vampires. Also, neither are playable in English. Meanwhile, Imadoki no Vampire: Bloody Bride has a complete, though imperfect, fan translation patch. But do you want to know when this game was translated into English? 2003. I didn't know anyone was fan translating PlayStation games in 2003. To quote the translator, "My wife and I have interest in many things vampire." Fair enough. I can confirm that this game never leaves your brain once you've experienced it. It is so much, all of the time. In a premise somehow orders of magnitude hornier than anything currently on Steam's new and trending tab, a young vampire prince is tasked with attending a human high school so that he may find that special someone, consensually suck her blood, and at last become a man in accordance with ancient vampiric traditions. Though it might look otherwise from its admittedly unpolished presentation, Bloody Bride is a big video game. It has a full RPG battle system. Side quests introduce entirely new characters to go on dates with, usually dooming you to either permanent failure or a newfound friendship with the reset button. All characters, from the primary heroines to the stock grindable RPG enemies, are given detailed, screen-filling portraits because the CD-ROM era is in full swing. And no, the game does not once choose to play coy with the vampire bites as sex metaphor. I would not fault anyone for finding the angle of philandering pickup artist as literal Halloween monster to be on the uncomfortable side. I will be right with you being rubbed the wrong way by the charm spell you'll periodically cast on a girl who is promptly sucked before vanishing from the game forever. More often than not though, I enjoy the game's campy appeal. Finally, vampires can get it on. The game of the year, 1997, is Schrödinger no Neko, Die Katze von Schrödinger. In English that's Schrodinger's cat. In Schrodinger's Cat, you play as a young girl traveling across time in search of her missing cat Schrödinger. Consider the apostrophe a contraction. On this journey you'll find locks and keys, eat basil and drink water to stave off hunger, and meet some new friends. Primarily, this game simulates walking. There's some combat, but not too much, a fact which you will likely become thankful for. No, Schrödinger's Cat is all about transporting you from your normal life into the third dimension. Polygons are the main course, and they taste like a cheeseburger without the tomato and onions. Despite 3D graphics being the exciting new technology of the PlayStation generation, they did not exactly come free. Schrödinger's Cat pulls off no technical magic tricks here. The frame rate and draw distance are just enough to be functional, and it only renders to half the size of the screen. These graphics are unmistakably dated, making them unquestionably timeless. The harsh pro-aliasing and jittering textures convey the sense of somewhere far from home, a strange world where you don't belong. Preserved in this game's digital amber is an ancient battle between man and machine, the grasping for a future now long past. That in itself may be a form of time travel. The game of the year, 1998, is The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Nintendo 64 owners had to wait an extra year to get their 3D time-traveling action-adventure masterpiece, but they were rewarded in time. Over the years, Ocarina of Time's critical reception has inflated from merely excellent to basically the de facto greatest game ever made. No actually existing piece of software could ever live up to that reputation, and thus Ocarina of Time lives today as more idea than game. I first played the 3DS version, over a decade removed from its origins and naive to most of its accolades. I loved it then too. The central gimmick of time hopping between a pre- and post-apocalyptic kingdom both breathes life into an already rich world and weaves an understated sense of melancholy through the game's second half. Like Schrödinger's Cat, Ocarina of Time is video games as places. Unlike Schrödinger's Cat, you can actually tell the rooms of its dungeons apart from one another. Ocarina of Time so precisely made the case for 3D graphics that it's tempting to blame it alone for the overinflated video game budgets of today. Things were about to change. As Y2K loomed and humanity stood on the cusp of a new, sadder world of Halo and 9/11 and all that shit, the games of old were about to say goodbye. But before then, in the 11th hour, the 1990s still had one last gift. The game of the year, 1999, is Pussy. Pussy is the greatest video game of the 20th century. With an all-star soundtrack of iconic tunes, character designs inspired by the work of Akira Toriyama, and a heart-wrenching romance at its core, Pussy is everything video games have aspired to be since the age of Pong and Super Mario Bros. It offers a true cinematic experience, typified by its iconic Pussy movies. It wields technical mastery, pulling off photorealistic graphics on hardware that had been discontinued for 7 years. There are over 49 levels. This game's qualities speak for themselves, though I will confess, I wasn't a fan when I played it in 1999. I found the shimmering text hard to read. I was frustrated by the early level designs, too often amounting to a sea of red herrings around a boring, easy solution. In short, I didn't get pussy. With 25 years of hindsight, I'm comfortable saying that I was wrong. Gamers wanted Ocarina of Time, but gamers needed pussy. We needed to see our silly hobby elevated to high art, to know that a computer could make you cry. Most strongly, we needed to see if Leonardo and Kate would get their happy ending. I won't spoil it. The game of the year 2000 is Tetris with Cardcaptor Sakura Eternal Heart. Think Tetris is a perfect game? Throw that thinking back in the mental trash can you fished it out from. Tetris with Cardcaptor Sakura Eternal Heart iterates on the Tetris formula by not making any sense at all. I've always considered myself kinda good at Tetris. If you're like me, Tetris with Cardcaptor Sakura Eternal Heart will humiliate you. The first thing you'll notice is that pieces move way too slow and soft drops are way too fast. If your situation requires some tricky maneuvering, you often have to choose between being very patient while throwing away precious time or risking a misdrop. And your situation will require some tricky maneuvering. I know how to clear lines and get points. I don't know how to handle this. Maybe regular Tetris was just too understandable for the new millennium. We needed something with a bit more yelling and a bit more nonsense. I've never seen this show. The game of the year 2001 is Gyakuten Saiban. I first played Gyakuten Saiban at age 20 during what would be my last summer vacation from college. At the time, I believed that adventure games weren't for me. Gyakuten Saiban captivated me to an extent comparable to games I played when my age was in single digits. It filled me with excitement over the possibilities of video games as a vehicle for narrative. I instinctively realized that many games like it both could exist and already did. Over that summer, I proceeded to play through every game in the series, even that one. About 2 years later, I started calling the original Gyakuten Saiban my favorite video game. Before that, I always said I didn't have a favorite video game. Gyakuten Saiban is a platonic ideal. It was made by exactly 7 people, 2 programmers, 2 graphic artists, a composer, a sound designer, and the game's writer-director. Carrying on the legacy of Not the Lord of the Rings, Gyakuten Saiban uses as few pieces as possible to construct a world-class adventure game. It is minimalism incarnate. While its sequels prove to be more elaborate productions, sometimes comically so, every drop of the series' core appeal can be found in the original Gyakuten Saiban. By the way, you should play Rise from the Ashes after finishing Gyakuten Saiban 3. The game of the year 2002 is Watch out! Wobbuffet is the most hated Pokemon alive. I feel sorry for it. Every day it has to endure a constant barrage of attempts on its life from all these Pokemon creatures. Much as any Tetris stack will one day top out, so too will Wobbuffet die. Watch Out for the Game Boy Advance serves as an empathy simulator in this regard. Its simplicity suggests something that would later in the decade be offered as a digital download, perhaps a browser game on Pokemon.com, but Watch Out is indeed a GBA game that was released physically. Not on a cartridge, but on motherfunking Pokemon cards. Just take your Wobbuffet, Alakazam, Murkrow, and Dunsparce from the Skyridge expansion, slide them into your Nintendo e-reader, and you too can die! It's beautiful that this guy is 1/4 of a video game. In a better world, instead of the internet, this is how we'd still distribute small games. Every newly minted $5 bill should come with a dot code for today's Wordle. That's games as a service right there. The game of the year 2003 is American Idol.
Oh, I wanna dance with somebody. I wanna feel the heat with somebody. Yeah, I wanna dance with somebody. With somebody who loves me. I
enjoyed that performance so much. You really lit up the stage. Good for you.
Once again, fabulous. And you proved to yourself and the public that you're brilliant.
Guys, I think we have a potential star here. This could be the one.
The Game of the Year 2004 is Kirby and the Amazing Mirror. Kirby and the Amazing Mirror is an open-ended, non-linear side-scrolling action game with light platforming elements. Honestly, I should just call it a Reflectroidvania. Part of me always feels the need to compare Amazing Mirror with other video games. It's Mega Man thrown in a blender. It's Symphony of the Night for communists. I do this because no other game is exactly like Kirby and the Amazing Mirror. Ever since I first claimed as such in 2022, I've been trying to prove myself wrong. Surely some other developer has at some point made exactly this. The closest I've come recently was when I replayed Fez, which is an open-ended platformer with a maze-like world and minimal progression systems, but is definitely not the same thing as Amazing Mirror. Fez is a puzzle game, a genre for which do whatever in any order is a common design priority. Amazing Mirror is a kid-friendly multiplayer game that seemingly landed on its interconnected open world by pure happenstance. I want nothing more than to take this game off its pedestal, to realize that its formula has been done earlier and better elsewhere. Instead, my appreciation for it has only grown. The Game of the Year 2005 is Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. Yeah, really, the game where you play as a lawyer. Sounds like the most boring thing in the world, right? There's no action, no violence, all you do is sit there and read. Like a lawyer. What's next? A game about Twilight Sparkle's dentist? But it makes sense when you stop and think about it. One of the most popular games for the Nintendo DS is Brain Age. Lawyers use brains to read the law and shit. And stay with me here, the game is actually good. You can point your finger at people who aren't as smart as you, and then cool music plays. In the virtual world, even something like a job can be just as fun as joining the military. I have no objections to calling this my 2005 Game of the Year. By the way, did you know courtrooms in Japan are actually like this? Weird country. The Game of the Year 2006 is I'm OK, a murder simulator. In the interest of being fair and balanced, here's a game where you kill lawyers. I'm OK was developed by a team of indie devs led by Derek Yu and designed by the notorious anti-video game violence advocate Jack Thompson, who provided the design document as part of a dare toward the video game industry at large. I'm OK crystallizes the man's legacy in video game form. His in-game stand-in is named Jack Offson, in a very not the Lord of the Rings-esque flair. I grew up with the aftermath of Jack Thompson with the idea that video games were something that needed defending. That's all still somewhere in me, whether I like it or not. Somewhere behind every word I say is a little kid in a world with social dynamics governed by which parents are cool with Call of Duty. Though, as an aspiring idea guy myself, I admire Thompson's work. I'm OK proved that in the age of the internet, anyone can design a video game. Admittedly, I sorta had a bad time recording this one. Because the game was not designed for a dual monitor setup, the cursor kept permanently disappearing during the bonus stages and at the weapon shop. I had to restart a bunch, which totally gunned down all my enthusiasm. I feel better now after getting some fresh air and stabbing someone outside a Taco Bell, but at the time it was annoying. The Game of the Year 2007 is Everybody Votes Channel. Democracy is a whole lot of fun. If you know me, you know that I love voting. It doesn't even matter what I'm voting for or what I'm voting on. I'll be honest, this year I just wrote in the name of a racehorse to see if anything would happen. I must not be alone. Everybody Votes Channel is the exact sort of kitschy demo application that Nintendo loved to include pre-installed on systems like the Wii, but it wasn't. You had to go to the Wii shopping channel and say, yes, I am actively downloading a new piece of software so I can answer whether I like vanilla ice cream or chocolate ice cream. My most concrete memory of Everybody Votes Channel comes from the suggestion box. I remember suggesting a poll and then immediately after hitting submit realizing that it was way too serious and that I was kind of an idiot. Maybe that's the story of my life. I'm an answerer, not an asker. Let you tell me to tell you what I think, but don't let me tell you to tell me what you think. The game of the year 2008 is not something I can safely disclose at this time. I see it when I close my eyes. The endless plain, the bright lights, the question left unanswered. I can't go back. I can never go back. Why can't I turn away? Why can't I turn away? The game of the year 2009 is Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger's title is somewhat ambiguous. It comes in a folder called Not Bubble Bobble. The old/lost RPG Maker game spreadsheet calls it Chrono Trigger Ratty after its creator, Ratty524. I choose to go with the in-game title, Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger's popularity was, I assume, relegated to a single now-lost forum thread. A quick Google search didn't turn up any relevant results. It's a comedy game, one made by and for a particular sort of late 2000s nerd. Unlike many things matching that description, Chrono Trigger kinda holds up. A lot of its charm comes less from individual jokes and more from the overall absurdity of the whole package. Plus, some of the individual jokes were dumb enough to make me laugh. You couldn't make this today is seldom true. Made today, Chrono Trigger would probably center around the in-jokes of a single Twitch streamer. It would have a more Googleable title. It also wouldn't even say the R word once. I admire Chrono Trigger's anonymity, which is why I'm only showing footage of this one particularly asinine segment. I'd rather not take this game's jokes for my own. If you're not turned away by 2009 forum humor, play this game for yourself. It's less than an hour long. Maybe download some other games from that spreadsheet while you're at it. You might find a couple interesting ones. Give Chrono Trigger a shot, and then don't even consider making a YouTube video about it. The game of the year 2010 is Pokemon Ranger Guardian Signs. This game was everything to me as a kid. It offered a new, alternate universe warping of the Pokemon formula that felt just as rich and tangible as the mainline games. I 100%ed Guardian Signs multiple times over. What an amazing game. I didn't have either of the other Pokemon Ranger games back then, but I've since heard just as much, if not more, praise directed towards Shadows of Almia. A couple years back, I finally tried to give the other games a shot, and wow, the first couple hours of both are a massive snooze fest. Maybe now's a good time to revisit Guardian Signs. Maybe it was never actually all that good either. But no! I refuse, because if I played it for this video, I'd need to do so in an emulator to capture footage, and drawing all those circles with a mouse or a Steam Deck touchscreen sounds miserable. As it stands, I only know Pokemon Ranger Guardian Signs as an underrated classic. The game of the year 2011 is 240p Test Suite. Getting a CRT is a bit of a game in itself. You can't even buy them at Target. Ask people where they got theirs and you're inevitably given some unique story like, my friend works at the dump, or my wife's drug dealer is a former broadcast engineer who had to sell his old professional grade equipment to pay for life-saving surgery. This one used to belong to my grandparents. Its geometry is just fine. The game of the year 2012 is Dr. Wily Visits Indonesia. I didn't stand a chance against this game. I'm garbage even at the normal Mega Man games, let alone the series as envisioned by and for its most dedicated fans. Also, I've never been to Indonesia, so I'm unfamiliar with the level design. Mega Man Dr. Wily Visits Indonesia is a ROM hack of Mega Man 3 created by Anandastoon, exploring what would happen if Dr. Wily visited Indonesia. Every level is entirely new, and there's even some real scrunkly Sonic music. Dr. Wily Visits Indonesia's difficulty can occasionally feel underhanded and unfun. It turns out the country has a whole bunch of bottomless pits which are just barely within the reach of Mega Man's jump arc. However, the original Mega Man 3 has plenty of nonsense of its own, and between the two, you can tell which was made in 1990 and which was made in 2012. Despite having yet to see a single Robot Master, I like Dr. Wily Visits Indonesia because, as with all the best works of fiction, it transports me to a place I could never go in real life. I can't stand airplanes. The Game of the Year 2013 is Send Me to Heaven. In creating Send Me to Heaven, artist Petr Swarovski tapped into a muse that has inspired great art since time immemorial. It would be really funny if people did something stupid for no reason. If you don't know SMTH by name, you may have still heard of it. This is the game where you throw your phone in the air and you're scored on how high it goes. It's an openly malicious piece of software of a kind transparent enough in its intentions that you can't really object to it. Unlike the similarly good joke app I'm Rich, Send Me to Heaven also functions as a normal game that they might as well make an Olympic event. It's a straightforward test of how high you can throw something. You could imagine Send Me to Heaven being invented by a particularly naive developer who wasn't trying to make a point about the fetishization of consumer electronic devices. It taps into the same physicality of hardware as the Wii minus all the lawsuit avoidance. Send Me to Heaven is the only good smartphone game. The Game of the Year 2014 is Pokemon Bank. Pokemon Bank launched in 2013 and then changed its mind so it could become 2014's Game of the Year. It was marketed as a permanent solution to a problem the Pokemon games have always faced, allowing players to transfer Pokemon from older to newer games across different hardware platforms. Pokemon Bank offered a cloud storage app that present and future games could connect to in perpetuity.
I had the opportunity to talk with Shoko Nakagawa, and, as everyone knows, she loves Pokemon. She wanted something like Pokemon Bank because she wanted her kids and grandkids to remember that their grandma fought battles using Charizard.
10 years later, Pokemon Bank is a Pokemon tomb. It's still around for now. When online services for 3DS games shut down this year, it was the one exception. It stayed up along with a little announcement saying, hey, please don't count on anything. Pokemon Bank isn't Game of the Year because I like it, but because I need it. I have so many Pokemon in there, including some with a lot of sentimental value. I never got Pokemon Home because the new games give you infinite save slots, and I don't really care about transferring stuff between games anymore. I really do not want to evacuate my Pokemon Bank until I have no choice. I'd have to divide my Pokemon across different games since they wouldn't all fit on a single save file. I'd have to decide which to bring to Gen 6 and which to Gen 7. This would be such a pain. I will have to do it eventually because there is no in perpetuity for any service maintained by any corporation. It will happen to you. The Game of the Year 2015 is The Reddit Game 2. All users are equal. It all happened one day, April 4th, 2015. First, at 11 a.m. Eastern Time was the long-awaited Season 5 premiere of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. Second, on Reddit, the moderators of r/MyLittlePony, fresh off a year of hiatus brain, change every user's flair to the equals sign. This is a reference to Season 5, Episode 1 of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. Third, on DeviantArt, Futzy01 releases the Reddit Game 2, All Users Are Equal. That's all it takes to make a game now. We have that much power. The Reddit Game 2 is admittedly rough on the hands, being all about rapid-fire clicking. This is almost certainly intentional, seeing as just holding down the mouse button worked fine in the Reddit Game 1. I've chosen the Reddit Game 2 as Game of the Year anyway because I love the idea of games as conversation. Whenever I've made a video game or a YouTube video, it's always felt like sending out a message in a bottle, accepting that it'll be received in a time and place fundamentally different from where it originated, trusting only that some semblance of meaning will survive the journey. Sometimes it feels as foolish as writing a joke about an election before you know the results, The Reddit game 2, released the same day as its Inspiration's inspiration, may be the closest one can get to talking in the language of games. I've never seen this show either. The Game of the Year 2016 is Court of Madness. Writing for a video game protagonist is nearly an oxymoron. The player is the protagonist. How in the world do you write a real person? This is the question that Court of Madness was created to answer, and I mean that in the most literal and direct sense. Court of Madness was created by a pair of grad students to test the efficacy of a simple game mechanic borrowed from the Dreamfall games. Whenever the player is given a menu of narrative choices, every option comes with a short description of the protagonist's thought process. That's the whole mechanic. You not only get extra detail of exactly what each option means, it's done in a way that gives you an on-ramp into inhabiting the mind of your character. With this, players reported feeling a stronger sense of identification with the protagonist compared to the control group. Most video games released in 2016 didn't even have a control group. Court of Madness is a visual novel with academic integrity, and I think its central mechanic works well. A promising step on the journey toward making the first good video game. The Game of the Year 2017 is Star Fox 2. Nintendo never listens to the fans. 2 decades of asking and we never got a sequel to Star Fox. But a broken clock is right several times a day if the hands are moving way too fast. Star Fox 2 is finally here. I don't like it. It's a scientific fact that the more a game tries to be cutting edge, the older it'll eventually feel. Star Fox has never felt old in the cool way. I could see someone else enjoying it in the same way I enjoy Schrodinger's cat, but these polygons are not my friends. The bare minimum frame rate and significant input lag combine to make me feel like I'm telling someone else how to play over a phone call with bad reception. You use the D-pad to strafe and the shoulder buttons to turn. That is fucked up. While I admit to not being a master of this control scheme, Faye here is a bit too steadfast in her reminders of what the Y button does. Yet even when I don't like Star Fox 2, I still respect its status as a trailblazer. Way back in 2017, this game pushed the Super NES Classic Edition hardware to its absolute limit. The Game of the Year 2018 is Dave's Challenge. So when I was in 11th grade, my high school started offering a video game design class, and I contorted my entire schedule to take said class. It effectively amounted to following a couple basic Construct 2 tutorials, and then turning in one original game at the end of each semester. It was one of the most easy A's I'd ever taken, and mostly a good excuse to make silly little joke games to publish on Skira Arcade. The company that provided the class's curriculum held a student game-making competition every semester. I went and submitted my final project, a weird little RPG called Equus Magnum. It didn't win, but that was only first semester. I had a second chance to bounce back and do it right. Every 5th period from winter to spring, after rushing through whatever lowball assignments that class threw at me, I plugged away at my next masterpiece. I created The Caverns, a 2D Minecraft-like, with the unwavering intent of proving my superior skills over other 14 to 18-year-olds across the country. I drew plenty of pixel art, learned new features of the engine, conducted playtests with classmates and family members. The final game used the maximum number of events allowed in the free version of Construct 2. I took winning that contest more seriously than any other facet of my high school life. Did it work? It doesn't matter. The competition submission date was in fact a whole month before the actual end of the school year. When I wrapped up on The Caverns, other students were only beginning to work on their final projects. That last month is when I made Dave's Challenge. Composed almost entirely of rectangles and stock photos, Dave's Challenge is the most fun I have ever had making a video game. I filled it with jokes and secrets. I made the player a white square as a placeholder and never bothered changing it. May turned to June, I submitted Dave's Challenge to the teacher as my final project, and then it was summer. Making The Caverns burned me out. What started as something I'd work on in the morning of every other school day soon bled into my time at home and then my lunch breaks. I spent all of this time on a game designed to impress whatever my idea was of the faceless STEM education experts who decided the best student video games. I put none of myself into the caverns. It was all just norms and expectations. When it was all over, I needed a game I both enjoyed working on and that had any sense of humor. As someone who today is constantly deeply critical both of my past creative work and particularly of who I was as a person in high school, do not take me lightly when I say that Dave's Challenge holds up. It's the fruit of raw creative expression that I wish I and everyone else could channel always. I do not remember what I bought with the $25 gift card I won for getting 3rd place in the spring 2018 STEM Views Got Game competition. I remember every room of Dave's Challenge. You know, I'm not sure if anybody else has played Dave's Challenge outside of that one classroom in 2018. I put it up on Skira Arcade, but because no one else played it, they eventually took it down. Well, here's a URL if you wish. The Game of the Year 2019 is Just Dance 2020. The last Just Dance game ever made. Always ahead of the curve, those rapscallion poptimists over at Ubisoft predicted the year 2020 all the way back in 2019. Form your own nuanced perspective on Ariana Grande's cultural appropriation as you move those hips and twist those nips through insert number here of the finest exports of American hegemony. Going through all 4 of your Wii remotes, changing all the batteries, wondering why none of them work until the first one mysteriously starts working again will only make your living room stage debut all the more skibbity. I'm jealous of today's kids. I didn't have Baby Shark when I played Just Dance 1997 on my mom's NES. I had to make do with old shit like Frank Sinatra and Kenny G. I didn't learn the Charleston until King Charles hit the dab on X.com. Having spent my life only listening to pop music if it played out of the radio on a school bus, having recently shouted with joy when a shuffled Spotify playlist played me a Macklemore song in my own goddamned car, I do not plan to be of the zeitgeist anytime soon. But when future historians look back at our generation doing TikTok dances with Wiimotes in hand, I will smile down at them from agnostic atheist heaven and know that I was there too. The Game of the Year 2020 is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate Challenger Pack 8. 2020 was a hard year. Global ramen shortages, woke Skittles commercials, too many horses in the hospitals, but at the end of it all we could at least find some levity in the loving arms of Daddy Sora Limited. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is unquestionably the greatest MP3 player ever made for the Nintendo Switch. Like many others, I've given years of both joy and disappointment to Smash character reveals, and few can compare to that of the 8th DLC character for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Cosmo Canyon. As the unquestionable greatest track of the overall killer Final Fantasy VII soundtrack, Cosmo Canyon deserves to be here. After all these years, we finally got a Final Fantasy character in Smash, and it was glorious. If Cosmo Canyon doesn't return for the next Smash Bros. Game for the Nintendo Switch Pro, maybe I'll, I don't know, kill someone? Also, I guess I just feel happy for Sephiroth. Like, good for him. Okay, so I drove to another city to record all this voiceover, and I was listening to the Final Fantasy VII soundtrack on shuffle in the car, and the moment I got off the freeway, One Winged Angel started playing. That's some kind of omen, I don't know. The Game of the Year 2021 is VR Rescue of Girls. There is no more traditional pastime than wanting what you can't have. VR Rescue of Girls is the work of VR Retro Remaster, in all caps, the mysterious talent behind VR Catgirl and VR Fight COVID-19. I can't have VR Rescue of Girls because I don't own a VR headset. You can't have VR Rescue of Girls either because it's been delisted from Steam. In fact, all of VR Retro Remaster's games have. VR Catgirl has been put down. We lost the fight against VR COVID-19. Skirt sliding has slid away. I am forever incomplete without VR Rescue of Girls. There is a girl-shaped hole at the core of my soul. Don't you want to play this too? Escape rooms, saving helpless dames, scary female ghosts. This is a lost media crisis as far as I'm concerned, and it's not alone. The idea that we can archive everything forever is a fantasy. More games being made means more games disappearing. Sure, if you want, you can take solace in the fact that most of them probably weren't any good. You'll never know if you were wrong. The Game of the Year 2022 is Kirby and the Forgotten Land. I didn't play Kirby and the Forgotten Land on launch day because I was busy making an hour-long video about a different Kirby game. From recording the first gameplay to uploading the final MPEG-4 file to YouTube, making that video took me 40 days and 40 nights. It demanded my undivided attention to the extent that I will likely never finish a project of its scope that fast ever again. As such, I couldn't let Kirby pull myself away from Kirby. I decided to hold off on Forgotten Land, saving it as a reward for finishing the video. I may have created the optimal conditions for loving a video game. After decades of Kirby's absence from the 3D platformer genre, seemingly not for lack of trying, Forgotten Land made it look easy. Since 2022 was not the launch year of the Nintendo 64, I won't use the phrase next evolution in relation to Kirby and the Forgotten Land. No, instead I'll say that this game showed me a new side of an old friend. I ended up playing many Kirby games that year, and it turns out they've always been good, even when they don't have interconnected open worlds. The Game of the Year 2023 is Crossword. Puzzmo is an online game platform started by game designer Zach Gage, specializing in daily puzzles. It is nakedly trying to replicate the success of Wordle, which is completely fine. I just go there for the crosswords. The idea behind Puzzmo is that you, a normal adult who doesn't even remember half the names of every warrior cat, have pre-existing daily routines. Puzzmo is meant to non-disruptively slide into said routines. That's probably why Crossword lands on the easier side of crossword puzzles and comes with a built-in hint system. It doesn't want to take too much of your time because you still have to brush your teeth and drive to the office to pretend to check your email for 8 hours while secretly binging Danganronpa Let's Plays. I'll be honest, these past 2 years have been light on routines for me. Most days I couldn't even tell you what time I woke up. The only constant has been me lying awake in bed, smartphone in hand, scraping the internet for any scraps of stimulus, just trying to stop thinking about how my dentist secretly hates me. My relation to Crossword, unfairly, is of something that demands less attention than reading Wikipedia. Crossword is the single defining video game of a year when it suddenly became much harder to acquire ADHD medication. That's way more insulting than it deserves. They're good puzzles. I don't believe all entertainment is in competition with all other entertainment, that Crossword is in the same race as Tears of the Kingdom just because both take time and neither give you money. All I'll say is that I am doing better now. A depressed person would not have been able to make this video. Whenever I've made a video game or a YouTube video, it's always felt like sending out a message in a bottle, accepting that it'll be received in a time and place fundamentally different from where it originated, trusting only that some semblance of meaning will survive the journey. I recorded that line in the past. I'm recording this line in the present. Now it is in the past. I will export this video in the future. I started writing the script the day I was able to fill my Adderall prescription, and I created Godi.txt at a point in time Windows can tell me down to the second. Only one date relevant to the production of this video has been made available to you, free of charge, as a gift. You can find it somewhere alongside the words, "A search for the best game of 2024. What could this date mean? Like many others, I first learned about get-out-of-jail-free cards from a board game called Monopoly. I have not played Monopoly in several years because no one else in my family likes getting bored. However, I have prepared a get-out-of-jail-free card for this video. It's Chansey. Either after this interlude or before, I reveal the Game of the Year 2024. Possible candidates include every video game that exists now and did not exist in 2023. However, during the production of this video, a video game releases. This is a video game that I have not played yet. This is a video game that is the last new video game that I play in 2024. This video game is this video's Achilles heel. My gift to you is the date in 2024 on which I start Metaphor ReFantazio. If at any point during the next segment you begin to doubt my credibility or sincerity, by all means, take a chance and consider Metaphor ReFantazio the game of the year 2024. Upon playing this card, all 40 of this video's GOTY choices will be annulled, and you will finally be able to close YouTube and return to those facets of your life to which I am irrelevant. Of course, if you don't play this card, and instead watch to the end, here in jail, who knows what you'll find. I won't try to sway you one way or the other. I'm just here to give you a little present. It is almost Christmas, after all. Or is it? Take it. It's yours. It's yours. Take it. Take it. Take it. It's yours. Take it. Take it. The game of the year 2024 is just a To the Moon series beach episode. In 2011, To the Moon was a beautiful, sincere, story-driven adventure game made by Freebird Games and written by Kan Gao. In 2024, it's a series of 3+ such games, one of which is among the most treasured, formative art experiences of my life. To explain why would be unsuitable for a video such as this. Just a To the Moon series beach episode is the sorta epilogue, almost last game of the series. Since the release of Imposter Factory in 2021, the series has been on somewhat of a victory lap, with a merch-heavy Kickstarter campaign and the development of 2 short, fan service-laden spin-off games, one of which is yet to be released. How much beach episode should be treated as an ending is uncertain. I'm choosing to treat it as one anyway. As the title transparently gives away, Just a To the Moon series beach episode is a lighthearted character hangout, but with a twist. Its appeal is fully predicated on the player's familiarity with the series. 90% of its runtime is fun, quasi-canon slice-of-life moments with characters whose lives and often deaths may have once made you cry. It casually drops spoilers for all 3 games. In truth, here we have a video game that mainly wants you to remember other video games. I'll confess, this is a Lifetime Achievement Award, but To the Moon is a game all about memory. For that reason alone, I'll bite. I want to remember To the Moon. Why do I feel like this series has never been given its due? On one hand, To the Moon is the one that made it. Few RPG Maker games, few mechanically light interactive stories, few indie games in general have been appreciated so widely as To the Moon. To use just one easily available metric, it has more Steam reviews than all 3 Indie Game the Movie subjects combined. It was a huge hit, especially for 2011. I also feel comfortable calling it an influential work in the use of video games to tell stories. To the Moon led to Toby Fox hiring Laura Shigihara to sing on the Deltarune soundtrack, if you'll consider that as evidence. However, maybe it's me, maybe I haven't looked in the right places, but I don't often see this game discussed in depth. You'll see it as an item in a list. You'll hear a chorus of people proclaiming the single sentence, "This video game made me cry." Fewer seem willing to interrogate exactly why they cried. Today, on the occasion of my Game of the Year 2024, I won't either. This game is so earnest. The whole series is. I could see it coming off as overly saccharine to those who don't approach it with a willingness to be charmed. It lacks the reassuring self-awareness of Undertale or the Stanley Parable. It's not a giant Mario reference like Braid. Even Gone Home packages its queer romance narrative and exploration of a troubled family as a subversion of horror and first-person shooter tropes. Outside of a few one-off jokes, To the Moon shows no interest in being a video game about video games. To discuss To the Moon requires you to temporarily stop being a gamer and start being a person. That's a notion seldom given space to breathe by our existing avenues of video game discussion, by our Steam reviews and GOTY choices. I've always considered my experiences with this series as personal, to the extent I chose not to capture any game footage for this video. Maybe a lot of people are like me. Maybe we're all just waiting for the right place. All I know is that place isn't here. If I won't tackle the deep questions, I'll at least rub up against the shallow ones. I will award Game of the Year to Just a To The Moon Series Beach episode without once showing a single line of dialogue. Let me run directly into the "Are video games art" trap that has ensnared so many writers before me. Forget what To The Moon means to me. What does To The Moon mean to video games? At the end of our trek through the greatest video games of all time, can I not conjure a broader narrative? Wanna know why Just a To The Moon Series Beach episode is at least as important as Pussy? I'll tell you why. Just understand that it isn't actually important. Video games use technology wrong. Ever since the creation of Space War in the mid-1980s, video games have been the products of amateur clowns trying to throw a protractor like a frisbee. Some people have made millions of dollars from video games and present themselves as honest professionals innovating in an exciting new industry. These people are fraudsters and deserve life in prison. Others instead view video games as an art form, believing that by lowering the barriers to entry and allowing more people to make more games, we can appreciate new perspectives and push at the boundaries of the medium until Roger Ebert finally lets us replace one of the stars on the American flag with the silhouette of Pac-Man. This is the purpose of RPG Maker. Few video game creation tools leave all the options on by default like RPG Maker. Everything about the software assumes the user is going to spend thousands of hours failing to make a Final Fantasy. This is an engine for making big games about numbers. That's what it means to use RPG Maker correctly. To the Moon turned the options off. To the Moon probably isn't an RPG if you consider the defining elements of RPGs to be stats and/or an attack button. Of the RPG Maker games that have found a sizable audience outside the RPG Maker community, many aren't RPGs. Certainly none are normal RPGs. The engine has instead been home to those interested in the quieter aspects of video games, people who don't have a right tool for the job. RPG Maker has spawned games praised for writing and games praised for atmosphere, comedy games, horror games, games in genres that have existed before computers, and games in no genre at all, united only by the expressive potential of inhabitable virtual places. To the Moon, and definitely Finding Paradise, expresses as much in its spaces as in its dialogue. If you're looking for the soul of the video game medium, whatever that means, that's where to start. The stats database is a useless appendage. The map editor is where you'll find the art. I still don't think any of this matters. I don't need to justify the existence of a game with more Steam reviews than Five Nights at Freddy's. I don't need to pretend video games aren't art just so I can find a loophole proving they are. Nothing needs proving. I never chose to care about video games. I just played a few and then ended up being good at caring about stuff. I love video games for what they are and do not feel that either myself or video games need anything more. Roger Ebert is dead. Jack Thompson is dead. My last game of the year will not be any culmination. It will be the year when I died. As such, I feel no need to rush toward the future. No anxiety over if I won't play the best game of 2025 until 2027. Take it as reassurance. Video games will not change very much. And speaking of video games, are you looking for more great content? My hope is that over the course of this video, you've grown interested in playing at least one of the games I've talked about. Getting it up and running correctly might prove more difficult for some games than others. I would know. Well, you can put your fears to rest with the aid of GOTY Players' Toolkit, a brand new webpage made by me compiling all the resources that helped me explore the games featured in this video, from patches to walkthroughs. Get started now at .lu.neocities.org/gpt. That's .lu.neocities.org/gpt. Who knows, there might even be a special surprise. Surprise? Since when was there? Again, check out .lu.neocities.org/gpt to find great links to numerous better websites. Thank you, and I will see you next time.